Hey, we got day two. Today we're going to talk, we're going to finish up motivation and emotion. We don't have much left. There's only about a third of the unit left. Is my voice? Yes, it is. Okay, good. Only have about a third of the unit left, or even less. You can see the terms here that we have left. So we're just going to go over these terms, which is the rest of unit 8, motivation and emotion, and then we're going to start on unit 10, which is personality. In personality, all we're going to talk about today is Freud and psychoanalysis, which actually ends up being a decent percentage of the entire unit. Then Tuesday, which is the next day we are going to have a quiz. But before that, we're going to go over the rest of Unit 10. So today we finish up 8, start half of 10. Then Tuesday we go over the second half of 10 and take a quiz. It'll obviously be an open note quiz. I haven't yet written it, but I will write it, and that'll be that. And that's actually, once we take the quiz on Tuesday, that'll finish up everything that we need to know for the AP test. So let's just go right into it. Let's see. Yep, that's it. So that's what we're gonna do today. For the Unit 8 stuff, I'm just gonna kind of walk through the terms that we have left because we just kind of have a hodgepodge left. And for 10, I'll just talk a lot about Freud, and then I'll look at the terms to make sure we didn't miss anything. But let's just walk through it. So spillover effect, and all these terms you could potentially be on the quiz, but spillover effect is it says that if you're doing something or watching something, you tend to attribute the physiological feelings you have to the person that you're with. So if it's essentially like a good dating technique is if you want to go on a date with someone, and it might be a good idea to do something that is physiologically stimulating, because then the person their heartbeat increases and they feel all that physiological effects, and then they attribute that to the other person. So if you go on a roller coaster, your heartbeat starts increasing, and just psychologically we tend to associate that with the person that we're with. And I guess you could go the negative way too. If you're having a bad time, you tend to associate that with the person you're with. We already did phobia. Phobia was in one of the other units, but it's still here. So it is an irrational fear. Rational is a key word, because a fear is not necessarily a phobia, but an irrational fear is. Catharsis is venting anger through aggressive behavior. They have done some studies that it's one of the things that's a little bit counterintuitive with psychology. Catharsis, you'd think that if you scream or punch a wall or scream into a pillow or punch your steering wheel, anything like that, that's all catharsis. It's venting your emotion into something physical. Studies have shown, you'd think that would actually decrease your aggression, but studies have shown that increases your aggression. I think we watched, I'll just do the old Google here. I think we watched this in the learning unit, but this sort of shows that direction. So there was the Bobo doll experiment where Albert Bandura, back in, I don't know what year it was, 70s, somewhere in there, he had kids watch an adult do one of two different things. Either they would play nicely, either they would play nicely with the Bobo doll, which is the little clown doll with the weight at the bottom, or they would play mean with the Bobo doll, so they'd hit it with hammers and things like that. And according to the intuitive catharsis model, if you watch the adult be violent, it should purge your own violent impulses, but of course the kid went in and basically did what the adult did. So if they watched something violent, they did something violent themselves, which sort of makes sense. Feel good, do good is also pretty intuitive. Feel good, do good just says you tend to do good things when in a good mood, and you tend to do bad things when you're in a bad mood. So just something funny about humans is when we're in a really good mood, we tend to be nicer to other people, and we're in a bad mood, we're meaner to other people. That makes sense. Adaptation level phenomenon and relative deprivation are kind of similar. Adaptation level phenomenon is we tend to judge our own experiences based on what we've dealt with before. So it's part of why, if you go through life, if your first job, you get out of college, you get paid $25,000 a year, and then you get a raise to, I don't know, $30,000 a year, that feels awesome. Then you get another raise and it's $40,000 a year, that's great. And you keep getting raises, that feels a lot better than if you started out at like $90,000 a year and just stayed constant, even though it's more money, because of things like the adaptation level phenomenon. Because we judge, we like feeling progress, and we like well, you don't care about your lawn, but if my lawn looks better and better every year, that feels good. So we judge against our own experiences. Relative deprivation is more about other people. So that is, you tend to judge your own experiences against others' experiences. That's kind of like the grass is always greener effect. It's also, I'm thinking coronavirus kind of relates to this in a sense that, in a way, it almost makes it better. If it was, and maybe you'll disagree, I don't know, but from my mind, and I need to be careful about how I phrase this, but in my mind, it almost makes it better that the whole world is going through this. If it was just Oklahoma that went through a tornado or something, and because of the tornado we were out of school, that would feel really isolated. Or if it was just you that got hit by a tornado and you were in this sort of situation that we're in right now, that would feel like a woe is me kind of a thing. You'd feel really sorry for yourself, but it's literally the whole world, which kind of makes you feel better about things. Or maybe you disagree, I don't know, but if you make a lot of money but all your friends make more money, you feel poor. If you make the same amount of money but your friends make less money, you feel rich. It's all relative to other people. General adaptation syndrome, and then personality types. Then we get to move on to Freud. So general adaptation syndrome says in stressors, which also relates to coronavirus, we go through 3 stages according to this theory: the alarm stage, resistance stage, and exhaustion stage. Alarm stage is the fight or flight. So that's you hear about coronavirus the first time, and then all the hormones go into your body, and you start feeling anxiety, and you go to below level of functioning. And then, according to this theory, at least, after that you'll enter resistance, which is hormones enter your body to make you actually perform better than when you were initially in alarm stage, to kind of be able to focus and possibly solve the problem. Also, your body's sort of healing itself from the stressors. If you can escape the general adaptation syndrome at that point, that's good. But if not, you'll go into exhaustion, which is where your body's hormones are depleted, and so you can't have that heightened sense of awareness anymore, and so then you enter exhaustion. So that would be like depression, fatigue, anxiety, things like that. So alarm is the fight or flight initial response. Resistance is you have hormones that are kind of giving you a heightened something physiological, and then exhaustion is if you don't get out of it, then you'll enter exhaustion, where you just give up. Sort of 2 personality types. Then we get to talk about Freud. And you've probably heard these before. You're like, I'm a really type A person. I'm not. I feel like I'm more of a type B, but I guess you'd be better to say which one of those I am. But type A is more very driven and motivated, aggressive, like to be in charge. And type B would be much more relaxed, easygoing, go with the flow kind of person. So that's that. And that's all in Unit 8. So I think we've gone over now all this stuff. The assignment for today is going to be over the next unit, which is, I don't even want to look at it. We're just going to open up Paint, and I'm going to start talking about Freud. Let's use the old, it's a little bit scary to type this into. Hopefully I don't have to edit something out here, because he was definitely a controversial person. Great, so here's Freud. Freud, the cigar is perfect. Freud, at the turn of the 1900s, so the turn of the 20th century, going into the 20th century, he became famous, and he was the first kind of celebrity psychologist. He started what he called psychoanalysis or psychoanalytic theory, and the bulk of his theory was about the unconscious. So this is going to look even worse than it usually does, but I didn't want it thicker than perfect. An iceberg. He made a metaphor like an iceberg. He said that our mind is like an iceberg. Whoops. Where an actual iceberg, most of an iceberg is actually underwater. That's just because ice is slightly less dense than water, so it floats, but most of an iceberg, the part that you can see is a minority of the iceberg, and most of it is actually underwater. And he said our brains are like that. So he said that our brains are mostly under consciousness. The part that you can see he called was the conscious part of the mind, and then right below the surface he called it the pre-conscious, And then below that, way under the surface, which he said was the most important part, is the unconscious. He never used the word subconscious, but since him, it's been collectively referred to as all that stuff that's under the water. But Freud said our minds are like that. So the conscious thoughts are what you're actually thinking right now. Like consciously, I'm thinking that I really like Microsoft Paint. It's a great tool. And I'm thinking, I don't know, that my green screen actually looks pretty good today. I'm not fuzzy. All the things that are actually going through your head, like maybe you're hungry or whatever you're literally thinking about and you're aware that you're thinking about right now. Preconscious thoughts are what you could be thinking about, you could be aware of, but you're not currently thinking about, so you could bring the preconscious into the conscious. And then unconscious, or what he said was the most important part of your brain, but you don't even have access to it. It is literally hidden from your thought, but he said it was the most important thing, driving the most of what we do and what we think. It should be noted that Freud didn't make most of his ideas based on science. He just kind of he used like introspection in himself. He thought deep in his own mind, and based on what he was thinking about his own mind, he kind of extrapolated that to everybody. So it was not scientifically derived, but he's still probably, unfortunately, the most famous person in psychology. But we learn about him because a lot of what he did do a lot of good things. One of the good things he did was, before Freud, when someone was crazy or when someone had a psychological disorder, you would actually physically do things to them, like you'd lock them up. You put leeches on them to drain their crazy blood out of their body. You'd chain them to a wall so they couldn't get their crazy on other people or whatever. But Freud was one of the first people to actually introduce talk therapy, which sounds kind of crazy that you wouldn't have done that before, but Freud actually talked to people, tried to talk the crazy out of them, so to speak. Whether that's whatever it is, schizophrenia or anxiety, whatever. So he started sort of counseling. He had a lot of bad stuff. He smoked cigars. He got mouth cancer from cigars, so he had to take his jaw in and out of his mouth multiple times a day, which he said was very painful. He used a lot of cocaine, which undoubtedly affected how he thought, and was very violent, and sex had a lot to do with a lot of his theories as well, but which is important to talk about. Let's see. All right, another part of his theory was the id, the ego, and the superego. Let's make that a little bigger. He said that all of our, well, I guess I should say what they are first. So the id it's kind of three parts of the, what was that movie? Emperor's New Groove? I think. Was that the one with the angel? Yes, it is. Perfect. Okay. I don't think I've ever actually seen this movie, but I just know that it's the one with the angel and the devil. So in this, and probably a lot of cartoons, but in this movie, there's a little devil that pops up and an angel that pops up. That's a perfect analogy for the id, the ego, and the superego. The id, according to Freud, is our bad instincts. It's the first impulse that comes into your mind when something happens, like, well, I could do that. It's the devil that's saying, well, you could do a bad thing. You could cheat on that test. You could cheat on your significant other. You could kill that person. You could cheat on your taxes. Anything like that that would be immoral but might benefit you in some way. The superego is the good one. Superego is like, what would Jesus do in the situation? It's the ideal. It makes you feel guilty for not doing the right thing, according to Freud, and it's the one that says, it tells you to do the right thing. So if you're in a test and you haven't studied, just take the test anyway, apologize to the teacher. Or like, if someone wrongs you, maybe you should just pray for them, that kind of thing. It may not even be, neither of these sides might even be realistic. They're kind of the extremes of either side. And then the ego is you in the middle that's listening to both of these and deciding what to actually do. The ego is called the reality principle. There it is. So id is the bad one, the devil. Ego is the reality. And the superego is the do-good principle. I don't know, for lack of a better word. Freud said all the conflict that we have is because of the conflict between, all the anxiety that we have is because of the conflict between the id and the superego. the id is wanting to do the wrong thing, and the superego is wanting to do the right thing, or at least feeling guilty for not doing the right thing. And it's the conflict between those two that creates our anxieties, at least according to Sigmund Freud. And he came up with defense mechanisms, which are the way that we combat these anxieties, according to him. And we're going to go over them. Actually, your assignment, there's going to be some other small things that we'll cover after this, but your assignment is going to be about these defense mechanisms. I'll have a little worksheet for you about these. So here's what they are. And you can reference the Quizlet to answer the questions on the worksheet or the Google Drive form. And they are repression, regression, reaction formation, projection, rationalization, displacement, sublimation, and denial. We'll just start at the top here, repression, and I'll go over some of the other ones that are above that as well. Repression is blocking out the traumatic things. So actually, a lot of people since Freud have said repression really doesn't happen as much as Freud thought that it did. In movies, repression happens a lot. Like if you get mugged in a movie, you might, like once the police talk to you, you completely block it out of memory and you wouldn't even remember that it happened. That would be repression. Or if something really bad happened, your significant other breaks up with you, someone dies, whatever, you just like completely block it out of memory, it's gone. And that's repression. Regression, I guess let me skip around here to denial. Denial is similar to repression, but repression is completely blocking it out. Denial is you know that it happened, but you refuse to accept it. Denial is more kind of delusional. Projection or repression, you don't even have access to it. It's just gone. Denial would be like if your girlfriend broke up with you and someone said, dude, I'm so sorry your girlfriend broke up with you, that's terrible. And you said, no, she still loves me. She loves me. She'll be back. That would be denial. Or like, this is refusing to accept reality. I don't know, that's exactly what I said in my example there. Regression is going back to an earlier stage in development. So that is if you start to get anxious and you start sucking your thumb or wetting the bed, or just generally like act like a child if you get in a bad situation. Reverting back to an earlier stage of development. Reaction formation is acting opposite the way you actually feel. So that could be if you really like somebody, but you act mean towards them. Maybe you have a crush on somebody, but you don't want them to know that you have a crush on them, so you act mean towards that person. Or if you don't like somebody, but you go out of your way to act super nice to them. You could think of it like overcompensating sort of for something that you think is wrong, but it's acting the opposite the way that you feel. Projection is taking traits about yourself and seeing them in other people. So that would be if you're a selfish person, you really like attention, and you see someone's walking down the hall at McGinnis and they drop their books, and you think like, that person's so selfish. They probably drop their books just to get attention. You're seeing your attention-seeking behavior in other people. Or it could even be a good thing, like if you really always like to do the right thing and you are selfless, and someone does something that seems maybe mean, and you say, well, they probably meant well by him. You might be projecting your own goodness on that other person. Rationalization is making excuses. It's if you fail a test, you say, well, it's because the teacher's bad, or the teacher doesn't like me, or the test wasn't fair. Or if you get fired from your job, it's, well, I mean, I didn't even like the job anyway. It was my boss is out to get me. It's any kind of an excuse to make up for a situation that's bad. Displacement is taking your anger out on something unrelated to what caused the anger in the first place. That would be if something bad, so your girlfriend breaks up with you and you punch a wall. It's like the piñata, emotional piñata. It could be you get fired and, well, you scream, punch a wall, let's see. Oh, there you go, yell at your little brother when you get home. It's taking your anger out on something unrelated. Sublimation is sort of like positive displacement. Sublimation is channeling your negative emotions and you doing something positive with them. So that would be if you get, that doesn't really work. If someone dies of cancer that you know, you're sad, but you channel that sadness into starting a foundation for cancer. Or let's see. Oh, here we go. Girlfriend breaks up with you, which makes you angry, but you use that anger to next time you're playing sports, you try even harder because you use that as fuel for sports. So that would be sublimation. Channeling unhealthy energy into something that's productive. Denial, like I said earlier, is refusal to accept reality. Let's clean up some of these other terms, and then I think we'll be pretty much done with Freud. Let's see. A lot of his are very PG-13 related. So there's iceberg, conscious, preconscious, unconscious, went over already. Id, ego, superego. All right, these are fun words, right? So he has these stages of development. Let me zoom in a little bit here. A lot of people have stages of development. He, being Freud, has the psychosexual stages of childhood development, if you can imagine it. It sounds really provocative at first, and it kind of is, but these sort of make sense when you think about it. It has to do with developmental stages. Oral is when you're breastfeeding, and then anal potty training, phallic, latent, and genital. All you need to know is just don't worry about the ages, but do know the order that they come in, and you'll need to know about fixations. According to Freud, you could get fixated on a stage. You've probably heard the word, that person's really anal about something. And if you've heard that, you all know what it means. It means someone's really uptight, or someone like really likes things to be ordered and is meticulous. And he says you can have a fixation on a stage, and then in adulthood, that shows it according to Freud, and Freud was crazy, and you can take what he says with a grain of salt. But if you have a fixation in the anal stage of development, then actually, oddly enough, you can have it's one of the stages, you can have two different fixations. You can be anal retentive, which when someone says that person is really anal about things, that would be what they mean by that probably, or anal expulsive, which is a fantastic visual, isn't it? But it's two things according to Freud in potty training, where anal retentive, according to Freud, I feel like I have to say that over and over, is anal retentive would be children during potty training that get pleasure in holding it in, or see that as a sense of control, and then that manifests itself later on in being very orderly. And anal expulsive is the other way, and that would be people that are very disorganized and have messy rooms and flourish under less organization. Here, I guess it's explained here. So I think that's pretty much it. Okay. Yeah, we'll go over projective test tomorrow. It's too much for today already. So that is all we're going to do for today after we clean up these next terms. Freud said he was very deterministic. He said by the time you're 6 years old, your personality is set in stone effectively, so you can't change. After Freud, they rejected a lot of what he said, and they said that's ridiculous. As I think a lot of you and me would agree that you can change after you're 6, but he said by the time you're 6, if you're a punk 6-year-old, you're going to be a punk adult, or whatever. But pretty much, he said childhood is extremely important, and a lot of what he would do in therapy would be to go back to your childhood and try and uncover the traumas, which he would say were in your unconscious. After Freud, there's a little bit more about how he did therapy we'll talk about tomorrow, or I guess Tuesday. But after Freud, a guy, I don't want to do that either. So let's have that be the end of today. The assignment for today is going to be to go over the defense mechanisms. You can look on Quizlet. I'll also upload a explanation sheet for the defense mechanisms, and that'll be it. So I'll see you on Tuesday. If you have any questions, I will also be for the Zoom call at 1 o'clock, which is every day. And show up, don't show up, but it's basically, if you have any questions or you just want to see other people and kind of get connected, show up for the Zoom call at 1 o'clock.